Hello, Guitar Smarts fans. Before you check out this podcast, I want to make you aware of a cool new place where you can interact with other Guitar Smarts listeners. It's a Facebook group called the Guitar Geek Hangout. That's where we hang out and talk about all things guitar. So, if you like the Guitar Smarts podcast, come and chat with Kiran and myself over in the Guitar Geek Hangout on Facebook. Maybe check out some pre-podcast clips and even get involved in asking and answering lots of questions from the other page dwellers. Hope to see you there.
Anyone that knows me and my OCD natures, and when they bring me a guitar, it comes back to them like a new guitar, and they're like, "Wow, you've cleaned it." I'm just like, I haven't just cleaned it. I've really cleaned it.
Greetings! Welcome to another Guitar Smarts podcast. Thanks for joining us. Now, you may not know this, but my Guitar Smarts co-host, Mr. Kiran Amliwala, is a fully trained and vastly experienced guitar technician, and he believes that there are 8 basic guitar maintenance tasks that each and every guitarist should be able to perform. Now, this was a long conversation, and it's jam-packed with information, so this week is part 1. Subscribe to the podcast in your favourite podcast app so that you don't miss part 2 next week and all the other Guitar Smarts podcasts. Come and give us a like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Guitar Smarts, and follow us on Instagram using the handle @guitar_smarts. That's enough waffle from me. Let's get to it.
So, this week, we thought it would be a good idea to have a chat about some of the things that I think every guitarist should know about guitar setup. Now, I don't think it's too controversial a statement to say that, right? But I think it's like, I kind of think it's like owning a car in some ways, right? There are certain things that you know will experience wear and tear on a car, and there are certain things you need to do to a car to keep it kind of running and functional. And there are certain things where you go, well, that's just either too complicated, or I need specialist tools to do, or a level of experience and confidence that I don't have. And that's when you take it to a mechanic, right? So I think about guitars in the same way. So I think it's really useful for every guitarist to be able to have an understanding of how to do some of the basics. So what we thought would be useful today to cover is, what are the key basic parts of guitar setup that every guitarist should really know? And then kind of say which are the ones that actually you need a bit more of an intermediate level of experience in terms of guitar tech setup to do, and that's fine. If you're comfortable, you can have a go. If you're not, take it to a tech, or some of the more advanced stuff, which has taken me certainly years to gain confidence and knowledge and the right tools to do properly. And I would advise people that unless they're on a kind of journey to becoming a tech, or have got some guitars that they want to learn and experiment and build knowledge on, that maybe there are some jobs that you give to a tech, because they are specialist jobs. But hopefully it's a way then for people to understand what things they could do quite easily, save a bit of money, and not take it to a tech and do it themselves, and know when they do need to perhaps save their money and stress and give it to somebody else to take care of. So that's what I thought we'd go through today.
And that's a fine line that for a lot of people is going to be in a different place, right? For a lot of people, yeah. I imagine for a lot of guitarists, right, changing the strings is something they'll do, and everything else potentially is something that they don't understand or don't know they have to do, or they would take to a technician to do. But as you say, there's more that you can do yourself than people realise.
I think so. And I think what you can do with... So I think there's 8 basic parts of guitar setup that every guitarist should feel comfortable doing. Okay? There's probably about 40 different parts of true guitar setup, which you would then go beyond those 8 that you do yourself and either learn how to do properly or take it to a tech. But I think there's 8 basic things that every guitarist should feel comfortable doing. And I think if you know those 8 things, it can probably actually decrease the frequency and level of work needed when you take it to a tech to get it overhauled, because you've kind of cared for the instrument and kept it at a certain standard of playability before things really start to wear out and it needs some major work, for example on the frets or electronics or something like that.
Okay, it makes complete sense to me, and I think one thing to point out as well is this something that is true of all guitars to you? This is not just something that's specific to... Is this specific to electric guitar maintenance, or is this generally, these 8 points that you're mentioning, is this something that's for all guitars?
Yeah, so the 8 points are definitely applicable to all guitars. One of the 8 points is some basics on electronics. So, I mean, if your guitar is an acoustic without any electronics and things, then certainly you can ignore that one. But a lot of people have, classical and steel strung electroacoustics that have some degree of electronics in it. And so what I'm going to talk about with that regard, to some extent applies to those as well. So I think these 8 basics apply to pretty much any guitar. And then I think there's a few that we'll cover as intermediate kind of things that go beyond those 8 steps, which, may be very specific to certain types of guitar. For example, things with like a Floyd Rose trem or something like that, which I think is a little bit more complex for some people to kind of get to grips with.
Yeah.
And then we go into the advanced stuff, which is not necessarily stuff that applies to specific guitars, but it's certainly things that I think only a tech should do on your guitar.
Okay. Yeah. Dear listener, here is your chance to be on the Guitar Smarts podcast. Do you have any questions? Do you have any suggestions for topics for the future? Do you have anything you want to say or comments for things that we've spoken about in the past? Well, if you leave us a message or drop your comments on Instagram or Facebook, then we'll be sure to mention you in a future podcast. Anyway, back to it. Cool. So let's make a start. So, 8 basic tasks.
Okay. So I'm going to try and make this fun, and rather than just make it a list.
Cool.
And as I was kind of preparing for this, because I've kind of gained this knowledge through a lot of trial and error, learning from some really, really great people as well. There's a guy called Steve who was a great mentor to me growing up. Steve is, ran the guitar shop in the local town. I worked for him at that guitar shop for many years, and he was a very accomplished guitar repair tech, luthier, and is indeed, to this day an exceptional carpenter. So, this is somebody who was really able to teach me and ground me in some of the basics. And I spent a lot of years, watching and seeing how he did things. And his kind of view on doing things was very much by feel, as well as using certain specific tools to do things. So I think that's quite an interesting thing that we're going to touch upon here, as well as I think a lot of people get scared about doing some of this stuff because they're like, I haven't got the right tools, and I don't want to invest in loads of tools or certain calibration equipment or measuring things that need to be to set actions at the correct height. And a lot of what I learnt was done using some very basic tools for these 8 basic steps that I'm going to cover. What I also did in kind of just a reflection of today, because a lot of this I've kind of gained as knowledge and it's become second nature to me now, is I tried to see what resources and things were available on the internet that I could direct people to say, well, look, if you want to have a read about this, have a look. Certainly websites like StewMac have great information on them and some really good videos and tutorials that people can follow up on if they want to learn more about it. But what I also learned when I was prepping and kind of thinking about how to explain all of this years of knowledge to people for this podcast was there's a lot of really bad information out there on the internet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I hadn't really appreciated it because it's been years since I've looked up, and read, how do you adjust the truss rod? Because I know how to do it. I've been doing it for years. Or how do you... I don't know, how do you set the intonation correctly and all those kind of things. And some of the stuff that I've been reading online over the last kind of day or two, it's just plain wrong or just not very good advice. So,
well, don't forget, Kiran, the internet is the place where the truth goes to die. So, in all areas of life.
Well, this is true. This is true. But these were on some relatively reputable websites as well. Like, wow. So anyway, what I thought would be quite fun, and I'm not going to pick on any individual or any website or anything like that and say, well, this is just wrong. But what I will do is I'll try and kind of comment on some of the stuff that I've read online, like that says do it in this way, and if I think that's really wrong or not the correct way of doing it, then I'll say as well, because I want people to feel comfortable and safe in what they're doing, but I also don't want them to make some kind of rookie mistakes or follow some bad advice that may be out there on the internet. So you probably want to know what the 8 basic steps are.
Yeah, let's go through it. Let's work our way through your tips to guitar technical freedom.
Right. Let's see how much. See how many of these we get through. The 8. We're going to try and at least nail the 8 today. And if we do a follow up on the intermediate and advanced stuff, then great. But step number 1, and it will be of no surprise to you. You've already mentioned it. Changing your strings. Right? Changing the strings, yes. Changing the strings on your guitar, which I remember when I got my first guitar. It was daunting. I was like, I didn't know where to begin with changing strings. Yeah. So, it might sound like an obvious and basic one and something that anybody listening to this podcast should be doing. But I can imagine there are some people that are just really not comfortable changing strings. I still get it wrong. I'll admit to that now. There's still times for me where, actually, the last time I changed the strings on my Les Paul, I finished changing it, I got it all done, and played it for about 2 minutes, and the first string just came off at the machine head. Obviously, I think I'd either cut it too short or I'd not wound it properly. And I just thought, I actually just kind of stick the string in, leave a bit of excess so I know I can get winds on it, and then just kind of wind it on whilst keeping it under pressure with my finger, kind of thing. But I don't know what I'm doing wrong, really, if I am doing something wrong. So here's where we learn the secrets. Let's take that then as a starting example. There is, and this will depend on the kind of how the string attaches to your particular machine head. If it's on a Les Paul style kind of tuning peg, or kind of, there's lots of different Fender style ones depending on how they kind of mount the string onto that. But let's use your Les Paul for example then, because the same principle of what I'm going to say applies to every guitar machine head. In terms of how you attach a string, figure out or learn what the locking principle is for attaching a string to your machine head. And by that, I don't mean have locking machine heads. I mean, there is a way you can wrap a string around the tuning post that will effectively lock it, so that even if the string isn't up to pitch, as if you pull on it as a loose string, it will lock and it will not, come free of the tuning head. That's the first step, right? So on your Les Paul, this is going to be quite difficult to describe verbally without having a guitar to kind of illustrate to people. It's a through post. It's a through post. So what I would do on a Les Paul is I would obviously put the string through the tailpiece. The ball end will obviously slot into the stop tailpiece. It goes over the saddle piece there. Use that as a guide to keep it in. It doesn't matter if it pops out during this process. You can always realign it into the saddle. Obviously pull the string up the length of the neck, and then what I do is I turn the tuning peg so that the through hole on your tuning peg is at 90 degrees to the neck. All right. Right. Okay. If that makes sense. So the string isn't traveling straight up through the post in one straight line. Okay. It has to turn at 90 degrees to go through the post. Okay. Exactly right. So then guide the string along through the nut, wrap it around the inside of the tuning post, so that the string then comes around and then towards the outside and then threads back through at that 90 degrees. So do you not take the string straight through the post when you're doing? No, you put a wind on yourself first, and then it's not even a full wind. It's probably about a half a wind, if anything, because it's the string is going basically through the nut, following inside the tuning post. It wraps around, and then if you imagine, we've put that tuning post at 90 degrees, the hole at 90 degrees. So the end of the string will then come back round and then thread through the outside of the tuning post through the hole. And at that point, if you pull the string, the length of the string up and lift it, it will be locked. It'll be locked in place.
Really?
Yeah. And then you can start winding.
Right, okay.
So each tuning post is going to have its own peculiarities about how the string mounts onto it. As you said, on your machine has on your Les Paul, it's a through post. So that would be the way to lock it on that.
Well, my Strat isn't. My Strat is the vintage kind of Fender where you go down into the post rather than through the post. Okay.
So same principle on that one. Put the string through the saddle on your Strat. It will probably go through the trem block, up over through the body, over the saddle. Then on the Fenders, what I do for that, because again there's a neat little trick to finding how much string length do you need, because your string is invariably going to be really long, and you've got to poke it down onto the top end, right, of the tuning post. So a little rule of thumb on those ones is take the string length, and say we're restringing the the low E. Okay. Measure up to the two tuning posts ahead from that. So to the D, measure the length of the string to the D and cut there. All right. That'll be plenty of string length now to work with. Okay. All right. So you've then measured an appropriate length of string, because, a string coming out of a packet, if you then try and poke that end into that low E tuning post and then start wrapping it around, you're going to end up with like 50 winds of string on your tuning post, right? Yeah. It's too long already. Right? And it's not, and more importantly, it's not going to lock properly before we start putting the wraps around the tuning post, because there's too much string length there to play with. And my principle is always lock that string in some way, just using the mechanics of the tuning post and the string before you then start applying your winds. Don't rely on the winds going round as the bit that keeps your string in place. So tool alert here, snips. So this is the first tool I guess we're looking at here that a guitarist should have is a pair of snips of some kind, not scissors or anything. And it doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, I have one of these. Obviously, you can't see it, but I keep one of these, which is for people listening because nobody can see this. It's a string winder for winding my string, but it's also a cutter that'll cut my strings. That does a good job. And if you've got an acoustic, it pops out your bridge pins. Perfect. As well. Great. Yeah, there's loads of them available on Amazon or whatever. Planet Waves do a bunch. You can find loads on the internet. But absolutely, tool number one that you will need is a decent set of string snips to, in this instance, what we're talking about is cutting the strings to length. I know some people like to leave inordinate amounts of string loose once they've put it on. I'm not really a fan of that. Cut it to length. So on your Strat, once you've measured the right length of string, so you've taken the string length, you've measured two tuning posts ahead of it to get the right length of string, you've cut the string, pop it, again, adjust the tuning post so that it's at 90 degrees to the neck, pop it down into the hole and wrap it round. Again, it's not even a full wind, it's like 3/4 of a wind around the top of the post to get your first wind. But then if you've done it correctly, you'll have created a kink and a lock with the string first, so that again, if you pull, it won't come out of the tuning post. So that's the first key thing to stopping string slippage and tuning issues. Or in the extreme case, what you found on your Les Paul when you restrung it, as soon as you started tuning it, it just popped out. Yeah. And I had a fairly decent number of winds on it. I think what I'd done is I hadn't done that locking thing properly. And also I think I potentially cut the excess off too close to the tuning peg afterwards. Yeah. And I think maybe it just slipped out under tension. Well, this is the thing that often happens as well. And if you've locked the string correctly, you can actually cut off all the way up to the tuning post and it won't come out when you start tuning it, because the lock is behind, where way behind where you're cutting. It's actually, the lock is formed at that first kink around the tuning post. So it mitigates a couple of different things. But certainly if you haven't locked it, it doesn't matter how many winds you put round there. If you end up cutting it off the excess too close, it will just slip back through and it will just ping off. So there's a handy little tip. I mean, we could spend hours talking about the different locking ways and different tuning posts, but that's not going to make for a lot of fun. So the first tip is really get yourself a decent set of string snips and figure out for your machine head, for your tuning post, what the right way to lock the string is onto that tuning post before you even start wrapping and tuning the string up to pitch. It makes a big difference and will save you a lot of heartache down the line when you're trying to stretch in those strings and with tuning stability and things like that.
Good. Okay.
How often you change your strings is kind of down to how much you can afford to change your strings and
how often you play.
How often you play, how often you sweat. I think that's pretty common knowledge.
Quick question about that, actually.
Yeah.
So even if you don't play very often, should you still be looking to change your strings at some kind of interval?
Yeah,
or does it not really affect the guitar?
Well, it does affect the guitar. It affects the tone because the strings will naturally tarnish anyway, even though, modern strings are made of materials that don't, instantly tarnish. And I know you can get coated strings that certainly last longer. And if you like the feel of them, because I think you can feel the coating on them to some extent, depending on the manufacturer, they definitely do last longer. And when I say last longer, that's in terms of tonal quality and clarity and brightness and how chimey they are. So over time, you'll start to, even on a guitar that you're not playing very often, you'll notice that the strings start to sound duller. And again, that will be influenced not only by atmospheric kind of tarnishing, but the level of sweat and things like that you have in your hands when you play. And also strings, as they age, start to naturally and slowly exert less tension on the guitar as well. They become looser and almost at an imperceptible level, but it will have an impact on how much that string pulls up against the truss rod and the neck. And so you can find that as well as the wood changing and under certain temperature conditions and things, if you've got a really old set of strings on a guitar, you never start to try and set up the guitar with that old set of strings on it, because again, it's just going to make your life more difficult because the string is not exerting a nice, constant, predictable force because it's just an old knackered string. So, if you've got a guitar that you haven't played for, let's say 6 months, because it's just sitting on a wall, you would expect those strings to sound dull and not be in brilliant condition, even if they haven't been played for 6 months. I would say maybe think about changing them.
Cool. So I guess if you're doing any kind of setup on your guitar, always have new strings ready to go.
Yeah, definitely.
The last thing I wanted to ask about strings is should you aim for a certain number of wraps around your machine head, or is it just a case of 2 or 3 is enough?
2 or 3 is definitely enough. I think there's a lot of mythology around this as well. People talk about the fact that if you have excessive number of wraps around there, it can prematurely age the tuning peg and age your machine heads and things like that. I'm not sure that's entirely true. I think it's definitely worse having too many wraps around the tuning peg. I've found it can lead to more kind of slipping type issues, and also it's a small thing, right? But the number of wraps around your tuning post also dictates to some extent the break angle over the nut of that string. Yeah. Because depending on where that string ends up finishing around the tuning post, because it's either got 1 or 2 wraps or 10 wraps, actually has a small but sometimes important difference on the actual angle of the string over the nut, particularly if you've got a guitar that hasn't got string trees like a Les Paul. And so it's often worth experimenting and playing with the number of wraps if you're having tuning issues, particularly on something like a Les Paul, to kind of see if that makes a difference by adding or subtracting a few different wraps and changing the break angle, provided the nut has been cut properly and is well lubricated. But as a rule of thumb, for me, 2 to 3 times around the tuning post is absolutely fine. And
2 to 3 times around.
Ideal. Yeah,
cool.
Anything more than that's overkill. Anything less than that, and you might you might change the break angle a little bit too much. So 2 to 3 times is fine, but don't be tempted to, because the manufacturer has given you this excessive length of string, don't be tempted to go, well, all of that needs to go around the tuning post. It definitely doesn't.
Yeah. Awesome. So sorry to interrupt this super interesting conversation. However, if you've made it this far, you should probably subscribe to the Guitar Smarts podcast. You can do that in your favourite podcast app. Go and do that now, and then come back to the show. Let's get back to it. So, basics everyone should know number 2, Kiran.
Right.
What is that?
Cleaning and oiling the fretboard. Anyone that knows me and my OCD natures, and when they bring me a guitar, it comes back to them like a new guitar, and they're like, "Wow, you've cleaned it." And I'm just like, I haven't just cleaned it. I've really cleaned it.
I took it in the bath with me.
No, but I think cleaning and oiling the fretboard is a really good thing to do whilst you're changing the strings anyway, right?
So what are the benefits of that?
So, and we should talk about the type of fretboard. So obviously anything that's a lacquered maple fretboard, you don't need to do any kind of lacquered fretboard. You don't need to do in terms of oiling it. Maybe to use some very light furniture polish, or even just a damp cloth, very slightly damp, not sopping wet, and just give it a wipe over and a dry with a tissue if it's a lacquered board. Nothing too
so
harsh.
that's because it's a lacquered board, there's no exposed wood, right? So
there's no exposed. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Unless obviously it's a vintage instrument where where you've kind of played through the lacquer and things. But again, if you're talking about that type of thing, I would just leave it and let it age and exhibit its graceful kind of aged self. So we're talking about unlacquered fretboards here, so the kind of rosewood or rosewood equivalents or ebony boards. And I know that actually manufacturers are using a whole heap of different kind of tone woods and manufacturing woods now for fretboards. But we're talking about the kind of rosewood type boards that you get. Just give them a light oiling. I tend to do it every other time I change my strings on a guitar. If it's a regular guitar that I'm using and I'm changing the strings, maybe let's say once a month on it, then I would oil the fretboard. And the advantages of doing that is that these woods can dry out over time, particularly if you live in a country where it's exposed to different temperatures, where it's going from extremes of hot and cold and things like that, and they can crack over time. It's rare to see it, but you do see it. But also, I think there's something nice about playing on a really nice, clean and oiled fretboard. Not so that the oil ends up on your fingers, but it looks nice and it kind of feels nicer to play. And there's nothing worse than seeing like a dry, fingerboard on a guitar. So it's a piece of wood. It's untreated. It's unlacquered. So look after it and nourish it with some lemon oil is really good. Again, used sparingly. I also like using boiled linseed oil as well, but again, that's got different properties and you need to kind of work with it in a different way. It can give you some really nice results if you use it in the right amount and apply it and take it off in the right way. But I would say for any beginner, get some lemon oil, pure lemon oil. It's available as a furniture polish, and utilize
and you
that.
can also, if you, because I've lemon oiled my Les Paul fretboard and Strat fretboard as well, and I don't think you have to go out to like some specialist supplier to find this. Do you? These are products available in guitar stores, right? As products for guitarists as well, because I know that the lemon oil I use is from a manufacturer, I can't remember who, but I got it in a guitar store, and in the bottle it's got an applicator in the top, so I don't even have to like use a rag or get the right amount. I can just take the lid off the bottle and then start putting it straight onto my fretboard, and then I just kind of wipe off all the excess and kind of rub it
Which I think is fine. No, they're not. It's not specialist. I mean, I've got loads of different lemon oils and linseed oils and stuff here that I use. I mean, I found it was much more cost effective, in fact, to buy lemon oil in the form of a furniture polish, because it's used as a furniture polish all the time, right?
Yeah.
Now, I also know I'm showing you like a massive bottle of lemon oil, right? I know that if I go and buy that size, I've got another one there, that size of guitar lemon oil, that's badged as guitar lemon oil, in about I don't know what it probably is, about 10-15 mil bottle. It was so expensive compared to buying that entire bottle just because it's badged as,
which is about half a litre by the looks of it.
Oh, it's a massive bottle, right? That's got to last me for years. But I do a lot of people's guitars, so this cost me a couple of quid, and it literally is pure natural lemon oil for this exact purpose. So you don't even have to buy guitar lemon oil.
So as you say, the benefits of that is you're protecting your instrument. You're making it. You're protecting its longevity, but also there is definitely a more comfortable playing experience.
I think so.
I feel that, and it's not just what's the word when you think it is, and it's not really placebo. It's not a placebo thing because you've done it and you expect it. Genuinely does provide a more comfortable playing experience.
I think so, because your fingers do come into contact with the fretboard as you're playing. It's not just the strings hitting the top of the frets, and your fingers don't go anywhere near the fretboard wood itself. They do, and so you'll feel and notice that difference. But also, it's not just the fretboard. If you've got acoustic guitars and things while you're changing the strings on that, the saddle area.
That's a good point.
Bridge plate is. Yeah, give that the same kind of treatment. I wouldn't use it on the body of an acoustic at all. No, that's a different kind of thing. But anything that's raw, natural wood, keep it oiled. You spoke about applying it directly with an applicator from the bottle. I mean, I would just be careful of that. I personally like to use a kind of lint-free cloth or kind of workshop tissue that doesn't give loads of fibers and stuff off, and apply the amount that I want before I then apply it to the guitar.
And I should explain, actually, the bottle I have has kind of like a felt top, so it's kind of do you remember Fast Fret, how that was kind of like, it's kind of like that. It's a bottle of lemon oil, but I can't pour it. It's not pourable. When you turn it up, it just makes the felt top of the bottle fill with lemon oil, and then you kind of rub it on with that. So I would never kind of just pour lemon oil over it like I'm kind of drizzling raspberry sauce over an ice cream or something.
But my worry with those type of applicators is if the foam or the applicator perishes in any way, or the mechanism that delivers the right amount of oil into the applicator fails in any way, and you end up with big blobs of this stuff going all over. Especially for me, if I'm working on a customer's guitar, that's not something that I want to have to then try and remove, even though it's fairly innocuous stuff. But I always just apply sparingly what I need to the right cloth, and then I can control how much goes in. And also then I can use the same cloth to wipe it off, because what we haven't spoken about is this stuff shouldn't just be left on there to soak in and dry of its own accord. It gets applied, left for a couple of minutes, and then wiped off as best as you can, wipe off all of the excess. So you shouldn't then be playing the guitar and be able to feel or smell lemon oil all over your fingers after having done this. That's kind of just
good stuff. So number 2, clean and oil the fretboard. Look after the condition of your fretboard, right?
Exactly. Excellent. Right, let's start getting a bit more technical. Right. So while we're changing our strings, cleaning and polishing the frets, right? This is... So
you're not, and I'm assuming you're not just talking about giving them a wipe with a cloth, right?
No.
Okay.
No, actually giving them a polish. So if they need it, right? So this is, again, not every time you change your strings, but your frets will tarnish and get grubby and accrue kind of grime and stuff over time. And this is something that you can definitely feel when you're doing string bends and you're playing the guitar. If you're playing on a set of really grubby, tarnished frets, polishing them up and making them shine not only makes it look a hell of a lot better, it also makes it play a lot smoother on nice, shiny, friction-free fretwork. So definitely something that's really easy to do. If you're doing it on like a lacquered board, I would say be very careful. Maybe use masking tape and mask off the board itself. Takes a couple of minutes to do. Just use like a decorator's low tack tape or that kind of paper tape and kind of mask off the actual fretboard before you start polishing them. Or you can buy these kind of little stainless steel string also kind of fret guards, which have a slot in them, right? And you just slot them over the top of the fret, and it protects the surrounding fretboard wood while you're polishing them. So make sure you kind of do that. On something like a rosewood board where it's not lacquered, actually you don't need to bother masking it off, and because we're not going to be using something hugely abrasive to polish the frets. We're not trying to reshape them, we're not trying to recrown them, we're just trying to very gently use a light abrasive to take off the surface grime and gunge. And so actually if you're using like some super fine steel wool, which you can get to polish them, like super fine stuff I've got, then actually that mild abrasive on the fretboard itself can clear off a lot of the gunge and grime, which you then subsequently oil the fretboard that we've just talked about. What I would say is if you're using super fine steel wool, it's also prudent to maybe put some, again, mask off the pickups while you're doing this, because the little fine particles of steel wool and things can get attracted to the magnets on the pickup. And what you then end up doing is you look at your pickup and you go, why is my pickup covered in these little fine silver hairs that stick it? And they are a pain to remove if you do that. So again, carefully, it's just a piece of paper tape or decorator's tape or something like that. Just carefully mask off your pickups and then just apply light pressure. You don't necessarily need to use anything like a metal polish or stuff like that, but if you want to, you can use a little bit of Brasso or Silvo or some kind of very, very mild abrasive metal polish if you need to. But the steel wool on itself often does the job. And all you're doing is just very lightly polishing them, and you'll see them come up an absolute treat.
So again, this is about maintaining the condition of your guitar, but also improving the playing experience, right?
Massively so. That will really feel slick and comfortable and things to play on. If you're not comfortable using steel wool and you don't want to go to the hassle of the mess and potentially all of the masking off, one product that I have discovered, which I'm really enjoying using, is Crimson Guitars. Which is a manufacturer in the UK, and they do make some. They're a lutherie company and a school as well, and they sell a lot of their tools. I've bought from them a number of different tools recently, but one of the things that I've been using for a year or two now is they have fret erasers, they're called. So they look like, for all intents and purposes, a chunky pencil eraser that we're all familiar with, except embedded into the rubber is a very fine abrasive grit. And they comes in a pack of them, all with different kind of coarseness. Now I use them when I'm doing a fret level and recrown, and then doing the final finishing work on frets, to take them from having just been roughly recrowned and shaped to then getting rid of any of the tooling marks and polishing them up to a really high shine. But in terms of just basic fret polishing and maintenance, if you were to get the super fine version of one of those erasers and use that would work really nicely as well.
Another interesting conversation. Hope you enjoyed it. Come back for more next week. To make sure you don't miss it, subscribe to this podcast on your favourite podcast app so you never miss a show. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/guitarsmarts. Like us on Instagram at guitar_smarts. Anyway, have a cracking week. Speak to you soon.